Most people don't lose their potential overnight. They slowly trade it away through habits that feel harmless. Even the smartest minds can drift into mediocrity without noticing. Today, we're not talking about intelligence, but the behaviors that quietly dull it. Welcome to the glitch cult, where awareness begins with discomfort. Have you ever caught yourself thinking about something for so long that you end up doing nothing at all? We've all been there, staring at a decision, replaying every possible outcome in our heads, trying to predict the future before we take a step. On the surface, it looks like intelligence. You're being careful, calculating, responsible. But beneath that logic, something else is happening. You're stuck, and the longer you think, the heavier that what if becomes. For smart people, this trap is almost invisible because it feels like a strength. They've been praised all their lives for being thoughtful and analytical, the kind who thinks before acting. So when they hesitate, it doesn't look like fear, it looks like wisdom. But analysis paralysis is just fear dressed up as intelligence. It's the fear of being wrong, of making a choice that can't be reversed. So they keep gathering data, asking for feedback, weighing options until the window of opportunity quietly closes. It's ironic. The same intelligence that helps them see possibilities also shows them every potential failure. And that's where they get lost. They try to calculate their way into certainty, not realizing that certainty is an illusion. No matter how much you think ahead, you can't think your way into the perfect outcome. At some point, action has to replace analysis. And the problem is, the longer someone stays in this loop, the more it starts to feel normal. They convince themselves they're just waiting for the right time. But that right time never comes, because the right time only appears in hindsight. And while they wait for clarity, someone less intelligent, but more decisive takes the opportunity and runs with it. The world doesn't reward the person who knows the most. It rewards the one who moves first and learns along the way. You can't think your way into progress. You have to act your way into it. Mistakes aren't signs of stupidity. They're signs of movement. Yet many smart people spend years avoiding small mistakes, not realizing that avoidance is the biggest mistake of all. Analysis paralysis doesn't just waste time, it kills momentum. It teaches the mind to confuse thinking with doing. And when that habit forms, intelligence stops being an advantage and starts being a prison. You don't have to think less. You just have to know when to stop thinking and start moving. Because clarity doesn't come before action. It's born from it. One of the strangest things about being smart is how lonely it can feel. When you see patterns others don't, or think a few steps ahead, conversations start to feel shallow. You stop feeling understood, and without realizing it, you begin to withdraw, not out of arrogance, but out of exhaustion. It feels easier to stay quiet than to constantly explain yourself. At first, that silence feels peaceful. You get to focus, think deeply, protect your mental space. But slowly, it turns into a kind of isolation that doesn't look like loneliness. It looks like independence. You tell yourself you don't need people, that you think better alone. And for a while, that's true. But over time, isolation becomes an echo chamber of one. You stop hearing new perspectives. You stop being challenged. And without friction, your thoughts stop evolving. Even the smartest mind needs contrast. Growth happens when your ideas collide with someone else's. When you're forced to explain, defend, or rethink what you believe. But if you only stay in your own head, your intelligence becomes repetitive. You start looping through the same thoughts, convincing yourself you're learning, when you're really just circling familiar ground. This is how many bright people unintentionally turn average. Not because they lose their intelligence, but because they stop expanding. They protect their minds so much that nothing new can enter. It's like living in a perfectly built house with locked doors and covered windows. And the truth is, we're not designed to think alone all the time. Even the greatest minds, scientists, artists, philosophers, found their breakthroughs through collaboration, debate, and exchange. Isolation might feel like clarity, but it quietly removes the chaos that forces creativity. What's even trickier is that smart people often mistake disagreement for ignorance. They stop listening when someone's logic doesn't match theirs. But disagreement isn't the enemy, it's fuel. It stretches your understanding, exposes your blind spots, and adds layers to your perspective. Intellectual isolation doesn't happen overnight. It begins with small habits, avoiding group discussions, tuning out opinions, only trusting your own reasoning. But over time, it narrows your world until you can no longer see beyond your own thoughts. And that's when intelligence starts to decay, not from lack of knowledge, but from lack of interaction. It starts subtly. You look at someone else's progress and think, I should be there by now. You tell yourself it's harmless, maybe even motivating. But comparison has a quiet way of stealing your focus from your own lane. You stop seeing what you've built and start seeing what you lack. Smart people are especially vulnerable to this. Because intelligence brings awareness, you can easily spot what others are doing better. You analyze why they succeeded, how they think, what edge they have. And at first, that analysis feels productive. But slowly it turns toxic. Every achievement you see becomes a reminder that you're not enough yet. Every scroll through someone else's success story adds another invisible weight. The problem isn't awareness, it's direction. When your awareness turns outward too much, it blinds you to your own growth. You start measuring your worth against timelines that were never meant for you. Someone else's pace becomes your yardstick, and your own journey starts to feel like failure. That's the paradox of smart minds. They can understand the logic of comparison and still fall into it emotionally. You can know that everyone has a different path and still feel behind. Because comparison doesn't speak to logic, it speaks to identity. It feeds on insecurity, not intellect. Over time, this spiral dulls originality. You start imitating without realizing it. Maybe you tweak your goals to sound more realistic, or adjust your dreams to match what's socially admired. You lose the rawness that made your ideas unique. Bit by bit, your individuality fades, replaced by what you think success should look like. And that's how smart people slowly become average. Not because they can't innovate, but because they stop trusting their own path. They measure their progress in borrowed metrics. They forget that being different is the reason they had potential in the first place. The truth is, comparison only makes sense when the destination is the same, and it rarely is. What's right for someone else might completely derail you, but it's hard to see that when you're constantly staring sideways instead of forward. If you zoom out, you'll realize something simple. Progress isn't linear, and success isn't a race. The moment you start seeing your journey as a personal timeline, not a competition, is the moment your uniqueness comes back to life. It's strange how the more connected we've become, the narrower our worlds have gotten. You'd think access to infinite information would make us wiser, more open-minded, but often it does the opposite. Because the moment you start forming opinions, the world around you starts shaping itself to agree with them. The people you follow, the content you consume, the algorithms that feed you, all begin to reflect your own beliefs back at you. Slowly, without realizing it, you start living inside an echo chamber. For smart people, this is especially dangerous. They tend to curate their environments carefully, selecting sources they trust, opinions they respect, ideas that align with logic. And while that sounds responsible, it can quietly turn into a trap. When you're always surrounded by agreement, your thinking stops evolving. You start mistaking consensus for truth. You stop questioning because everything you see seems to confirm what you already believe. The echo chamber effect doesn't announce itself. It doesn't look like arrogance or ignorance. It looks like certainty. You start feeling confident about your views because every conversation, every headline, every video supports them. But that's not wisdom, that's insulation. True intelligence doesn't come from being right. It comes from being willing to be wrong. Yet, in an echo chamber, you rarely get that chance. And it's not just digital. It happens in real life too. In friend circles, workplaces, even relationships. We naturally gravitate toward people who make us feel understood. But when everyone around you thinks the same way, you stop encountering the friction that sharpens your mind. You start valuing comfort over challenge, validation over exploration. And that's when intelligence starts to dull. Not because it's lost, but because it's no longer being tested. The worst part is, echo chambers feel good. They make you feel smart, secure, and certain. But comfort and clarity are not the same thing. Growth only happens when your ideas are questioned, when you're forced to defend, rethink, and rebuild them. Without that tension, your mind might still be active, but it's running in circles inside its own beliefs. That's how even the brightest people become average thinkers, by living in a world that only mirrors them. To stay sharp, you have to step outside your own logic once in a while. You have to seek out the noise that disagrees with you. Because if you only listen to echoes, you'll never hear anything new.